Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another powerful myosh webinar. My name is Christina and I will be your host for today's session, proudly brought to you in collaboration with Women in Safety. Now, today's topic is one that resonates with safety professionals at every level. Creating influence, how safety professionals can win leaders over. Now, if you've ever found yourself armed with the right data, the right solution, and the right intent, only to struggle to get buy-in from leaders, you're not alone. Influence in safety isn't about raising your voice. It's about building trust, speaking the language of business, and showing that safety drives performance, people outcomes, and profit. Now, joining us to lead this conversation is the incredible Alanna Ball, a global leader in WHS, a trusted advisor to organisations across Australia, and the inspiring founder of Women in Safety. Alanna is known for her energy, insights, and her ability to break complex challenges into practical, empowering strategies. Now, as always, this will be an interactive session, so please make the most of the chat. Share your thoughts, questions, your reflections as we go. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box as well, so we'll aim to bring your comments in throughout the discussion. And if we've got time, we might have a little Q&A at the end, but we'll see how we go. Just a quick reminder, today's session is also being recorded, so if you have registered, the replay will be in your inbox shortly after today's session. Now, without further ado, I'm going to stop yapping and please help me give a warm welcome to our presenter today, Alanna.
Thanks, Christina. It's wonderful to be here. And it actually feels quite weird to be on the flip side. It's usually me hosting webinars for the Women in Safety community. So it feels a little bit weird. I will share my screen. Hopefully we get it all correct. Again, I'm used to making sure that the presenter shares theirs, not this side around where I have to do it for myself. Can you see the slides if I press share?
Yep. Then just...
Yep, so you should be seeing that. If I just move, it's given. Okay. So you can see the slides. If I just minimize that and bring up, I have notes because then my brain lets me do amazing things. All right, I think we're nearly ready. All right. Thank you. I should learn to do it from this side more often, right? No, thank you for joining this session. As Christina said, I'm talking all about influence because I think it's something that, for me in health and safety, probably has been one of the biggest, game changers when I think about what's really shifted the dial. So I won't yap too much about me, but for those that I haven't met before, as Christina said, I'm Alanna Ball and I'm a very multifaceted person. So I'll start up here. It's when I was young and youthful and didn't have as many wrinkles or grey hairs. But my education, I actually started with a Bachelor of Business in HR. I really loved the impact that HR had on people and what we could achieve through kind of HR, organisational development, talent retention, all those kind of things. And at the end of that said, no, that's not enough, went on and did a Bachelor of Occ Health and Safety and then rounded that out with a graduate certificate in applied law and said that's enough. That now has way too many grey hairs and wrinkles. I'm also a very proud mum to 4-year-old twins and a 6-year-old and wife, although husband gets mentioned last in that, so we won't tell him that. I have the Women in Safety audience, if you will, community, and we're a really passionate group of professionals. And the reason I started it was all about asking stupid questions, having conversations, and just being brave enough to say, I don't have to have all the answers, and it should be about collaboration. And I think the Women in Safety community has really grown in that ability to have those conversations that says, I really don't know it all. And so some of those stories are shared in the Women in Safety podcast, and we then celebrate it in the Women in Safety Awards. I am also a health and safety consultant, and I started that on the pure basis of my twins, my little twinnies there, were born at 27 weeks, and sitting in a hospital and watching them fight for the basics of life really makes you question what you want to deliver in this world and what are you aiming to achieve. And I think about, from a health and safety perspective, that if I'm going to show up as a leader, I want to show up with full intent and to be able to really deliver for organizations that my children could one day be working for when they had a start to life that meant they just wanted to live and breathe, right? So in those quiet days of NICU, I decided that I would go out on my own, and I've been doing that for about 4 years now, working with ASX level businesses all the way down to really small one-man bands who are just trying to do the right thing. And then most recently, because I don't have enough on my plate, I took over the Hunter Safety Awards from the incredible Sarah Jane Dunford. And for me, that is all about both the Women in Safety Awards and the Hunter Awards is all about celebrating health and safety. I think, you know, the Women in Safety community listens to me rant all the time that we so often reflect backwards on safety, and we look at, you know, your Piper Alphas of the world to learn from safety. Why are we not learning from those that are doing it so incredibly well? So both of those award ceremonies highlight incredible organisations and individuals who are doing the right thing in safety, and they're trying and they're influencing really, really well. So for me, that was a no-brainer when Sarah Jane spoke to me to take that one. So that is who I am and kind of where I come from. For me, today is not a sales pitch on any of those. If any of that interests you, you will find me and find those communities or find those areas that you're interested in learning more about. So I would love to hear in the chat box, if you want to pop in for me at the moment, what do you see as the biggest barriers for you to do influencing in your day-to-day job? What's a barrier? You know, the ones that I guess I hear quite often might be leaders only care about costs. It might be safety's compliance. It's not strategic. I'm not in the right meetings. I'm not being heard. So I'd love for you to drop what your barrier is at the moment. I'll give you a minute to pop in the chat before we go on.
I just want to say, I don't think there would be many people with a similar foresight and brain as a new, like, well, not a new mum, but a mum with 27-week-old twins that are then thinking about how they can do better for others at the time. Like, that's a special bloody thing. I hope you know that.
Thank you. Well, I think it is. It's just the I don't think you're faced that often with a moment to sit and, you know, it wasn't life-threatening for me, but I think, you know, watching these people fight for the basic needs, and you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and, you know, that was entrenched both from a HR and a safety perspective, that, you know, they were at that very fundamental level. And I think the more that I don't know, but thank you. But it was very a time that I got to pause. And I think in our career, right, I don't think we pause enough. And this was such an opportunity, and I had to look for those silver linings in that opportunity. So and look, so in that time, I'm too busy cutting through the noise of other divisions, competing needs, changing people's mindsets, not having a lot of say, influencing up and across belief the unknown. I'm hoping more than anything, whether they're resonating with you or not, I hope out of all of those things shared that the main thing you see is that you're not alone, that those barriers exist not just for you, that those barriers exist. You could take health and safety out of this conversation because there would be people in IT, in finance that are challenged with the same barriers, right? But today our conversation is to look at what could we do a little bit differently, because as you've just seen through the chat, you're not alone in this, and if one solution fits with you, then let's hope that that one's the one that you can get through. So the importance then, I think, really stands for itself, but there was a Harvard Business report or review that was done that said there's around 70% of change initiatives fail. And it's not because the idea or the concept was wrong. It was that people were not influenced the right way. They were not influenced to the full extent to support what they were talking about. And I think for me, the fact that you've got 70% of those initiatives failing on the pure basis of influence, I think in health and safety, we can't risk that 70% of what we deliver could possibly fail because we didn't do it properly. So I think when we think about what do we do, I reflect even on, and particularly in the women in safety community, I talk a lot about influence. And one of the things that I often talk about is the rise of influencer marketing. Now, forever and a day, we've had organizations that have such great marketing teams, right? They have PR, marketing, comms, they've got specialists in-house, right? And I'll talk to where this then plays out from a trust perspective. But we think about the rise of influencer marketing. They're coming to that influencer marketing because they're not buying it then from a brand, they're buying it from a trusted advisor. They're buying it from someone who's taken the time to influence them to buy something, and how powerful that is. So how do we turn ourselves almost into mini versions of influencers in the organization, and taking those lessons learned from what great, I'm talking social media influencers, great social media influencers, what do they do to get a large audience to go and buy one product, right?
Something that I find with that thing, the influencer word, I find a lot of people go, oh, or like they're like, oh, that's not a real thing. But it's such a subliminal thing that we are being influenced all day, every day by people on the internet. And I think, and I think if you take the social media or the stereotypical like Fitspo influencer out of the equation, and you realize that it could be a safety influencer, it could be all of this stuff that we do all day, every day, it just changes it so much. And you realize, Christ, this is something else we could do, don't you?
Yep. How do you bring them? And that's why, Christina, the image of this is on there, because we're being influenced and pulled in so many different directions all the time. What direction do you take next? How do we lead them all down the same path? How do we make them all end up at the same destination? We can take them on different paths there, right? And you think again to your Fitspo influencer, right? Everyone might be on their own journey when it comes to safe fitness, and sub that then for health and safety. They're on their own path to a destination, and that destination is health, right? So again, it's a health and safety, healthy and safe organization. All we need to do is help them give them the directions, navigate the road, make sure the road ahead is paved for them so that they can get to the destination, that they've got the right resources, the right outcomes to actually get there. And for me, it's really then about bridging between what we know should happen and what we need them to actually do. So that's why that photo is there. It is purely to say we're influenced all the time. It can be really busy. Let's filter everyone down a path that we end up at the same destination. Some days I surprise myself what comes out of my mouth, just so you know. So then we've got what's the cost of not doing it right? And there's a really incredible book by Stephen Covey. It's called The Speed of Trust. And he talks about when trust goes down, when trust goes down, speed goes down and cost goes up. So I think about, again, the influencer side. If you've got trust, you've got people, like, the growth happens, the buy-in happens, the how many people are doing things. Like, it's such a positive impact when trust comes into it. And I'll talk about the trust equation shortly. But when we fail to influence then, and I think this is stuff we know, right? And we've got the lovely graph of all the different costs, but the cost is huge. We've got the people cost, which I think we know. We've got the preventable injuries, we've got stress, we've got burnout. We've got, if we're not influencing influencing properly and they're not hearing that right message. You've got performance, so lost time injury, you've got disengaged teams, the project ends up getting delayed, and then profit, right? The profit just gets eaten away at. You've got higher claims, you've got turnover costs, reputation hits, can't even speak. And I think when we think about those things, and I think we can all associate that when it goes wrong, we know it goes wrong. I'm preaching to the converted as far as we know that when it goes wrong, that there's a cost associated, but how do we bring them on that journey so that they see it better, right? And for me, sometimes it's actually recognizing what those costs are, so that we can do that influence piece faster, better, more efficient. So how do we start to change some of it? And look, I think we've all probably worked with those people who are the policeman side of health and safety versus the influential side. And I very much come from the side of the more that we influence and have that collaborative approach, the better outcomes. Now, where we have a mindset shift, for me, comes from influence is not your level of power or authority in the business. You don't need the biggest title to influence someone. You don't need the biggest team to influence someone. Authority gives power from the role, from the title, from the hierarchy, right? Influence is earned by trust, by respect, by credibility. It's the commitment. And I think the more that we actually sit in this space of influence, the better outcomes. And a couple of really, global examples of where this went really well. Jacinda Ardern is a classic example of, she has authority, but used influence. So when there was the Christchurch mosque shooting in 2019, when she went to meet with the family members, she wore a hijab. And for me, when I reflect on her experience and I guess where she was in that, she turned up and said, they are us. It's all of these people, we are one. This is impacting all of us. She had the authority to enforce things. She could have put anything in place after that day to do things, but it was through her empathy and influence that really changed the way the country came together, rather than just stick. And it's the old stick versus carrot, right? So alternate them out, whatever you want to do. But in that case, Jacinda Ardern showed that influencing through empathy was far better than just coming at it from an authority perspective. Indra Nooyi, I think is how you say the last name, was the former CEO of PepsiCo. If you have time, look it up. It was actually really beautiful. She would send her senior executives, so the senior executives, she would send their parents, if they were alive and in contact, she would send their parents letters thanking them for raising capable leaders. And for me, that had nothing to do with authority or her role or a need to do. It was showing for her that she could influence better through personal connection, that her leaders then knew that she was connected to a message, to an idea, to a concept, to these people. She didn't have to do that. And again, that's that difference between, she had the authority to make whatever decision she really wanted, but she used influence to bring people on the journey, to encourage open dialogue, because she'd built that trust.
One thing I find with everything that you've spoken about so far, one word that keeps coming out to me is genuine, and having a genuine passion and a genuine feeling behind what you're trying to influence, as well as a genuine voice when it comes to telling people what you're trying to get across. It doesn't matter if you're the PA or if you're the receptionist or if you're on the front line. Like, if you're genuinely excited or you genuinely believe that something that you're trying to change will work, that will come across to help influencing all of these changes, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think, I and happy for the chat to kind of comment, but I know that there's been times in organisations I've worked for that perhaps you're communicating something that you don't necessarily agree with, and that definitely adds a level of complexity because it doesn't align to your core values, right? And values is something I speak to quite a lot. In any work I do, because I think if as a professional you know what your values are, it helps in that influence piece, and I'll show you why shortly. But I think it's knowing the why behind the message is always going to be, and that stuff I think I'd like to say we all know, but I think sometimes it gets forgotten, and is one of our practical kind of takeaways for today. But absolutely, I think if you're not genuine, it's going to come through, right? Everyone knows, everyone will cut through it pretty quickly. So, and again, I think, Christina, to take your point, say, for instance, it's not something that you completely align with. So from a personal standpoint, it feels a little bit, I don't necessarily agree with the way we're going, or I don't understand why we're doing it. This is another way that we can kind of start to really lean into finding solutions rather than just the problem. And for me, the language of business. So speak the language that the people actually need to hear. We are part of the business. We are not safety. And I think the sooner we learn that we are part of an organization that didn't start because safety was their number one priority, yes, safety is a priority, but no business goes into business purely because they want to make sure that there is, health and safety is the first thing. They go into it because they've got a problem, they find a solution, and they start a business to close that gap. And at the end of the day, until we start talking to the business as if it's a business, we're going to start losing that trust, that influence ability. And I think if you want to drop, it's kind of like a bingo game, right? What's the phrase your leaders are using constantly at the moment? It might be the efficiency, it might be innovation. I'd love to hear what are the bingo words that are floating around at the moment. Yeah, what are the little buzzwords? But I think the more that we start talking about, cost, efficiency, growth, reputation, power of work, yeah, sometimes it's just, yeah. Well, so an example might be, we need to address, so the safety framing might be, we've got to address stress and burnout, whereas the business kind of framing, or the way that we might comms it, is more about turnover in this XYZ division is at 22%. This is the cost associated with recruitment and onboarding. Supporting mental health is going to reduce that turnover by X percentage, therefore 250,000 saved by the end of the year, kind of thing. You've got the safety framing, people aren't wearing their PPE, like you're feeling really frustrated. I've said these words, right? Absolutely not hiding behind the fact that I've done all these things as well, and I might do them again, and that's okay. So people aren't wearing their PPE. It's really frustrating. That's the safety framing. The business framing might start to more look like non-compliance fines could be X. Proactive monitoring could cost us X, but avoids XYZ penalty or XYZ injuries. So again, framing it in a sense of whether it's operational, whether it's from a actual profit and loss side of things, the more that we actually understand the business. And again, in the women in safety community in particular, I very much talk to how do you start to build relationships outside of health and safety, because we're not the only ones. And I always talk to, a really easy example of this is IT, right? IT are not a revenue generating part of the business, but they have a high cost at doing business. They have to get things over the line. They've got risk. They've got security risks. They've got all of these, like, again, you can kind of swap the words out, but there's people risk associated with IT, right? From a data and IP and all those kind of things. IT have to go to the exec and present strategies, we need $10 million to actually deliver this program. That means that we've got to get this in. Go and talk to them about how they're presenting to executives about asking for $10 million to deliver the program. Ask them how are they presenting their strategy, or what's in their strategy to get the leaders buy-in, because again, non-revenue generating, but asking for money, they too have a strategy. They too have, we're trying to make the business better. Let's look at it from a different lens so that we can actually speak the language of the business, I think is such an important part of what we do. So this is my bread and butter. I think about this far too often than I probably care to admit, to be fair, but one that I just love. So this is the trust equation by David Meister. He believes and wrote a book that talks about trust equaling credibility and reliability and intimacy, not the sexy type, divided by self-orientation. So credibility talks about your words, your skills, who you are. Who am I? I talk to you about building that credibility at the start, right? Here's my qualifications when it comes to, I went to university. Well done, me. Reliability, I showed up on time today. If you've asked me for something, I've committed that to you and I showed up reliably in that sense. Intimacy is more about that connection. Do I feel safe sharing that? And for me, some of that is me showing you that I'm a mum. I showed you I had a beer in my hand. Like, it's trying to show you that there is some level of personal connection behind, this screen and my qualifications. And I showed up on time, right? Because I want you to listen to what I have to say. And I'm trying to build this trust level that you're going to take on board what I'm saying. Otherwise, it's not worth my time, not worth your time. And time's so important, right? And then when we talk about dividing that then by self-orientation, it's about going, do I have to be the smartest one in the room? And I can tell you now, I'm absolutely not. And you will never find me in a room that says that I am, because I'm such a believer that we can always learn more. I don't like best practice because I think we can always have better practice. So for me, this trust equation, and it comes into so many elements of what I do, whether it's from a consulting perspective, if there's been some sort of misalignment with a client, I go back to this and go, okay, credibility, I've established that. Okay, maybe I was a bit slow on that email, or, I had to change a meeting. Perhaps they're not trusting that I'm going to deliver this because I didn't show up in these meetings. Or perhaps I did show up and I may have come across that I knew everything and I had all the solutions, when maybe they have all the solutions and I need to just get those solutions out of them, or I didn't listen enough, right? And so David actually talks to the most dangerous part is that self-orientation, because you can be the smartest, most reliable person in the room, but if people think you're in it for themselves, that trust is gone. And that's in health and safety. When we think about how we present what we do, if we're not bringing them on that journey, and if we're just, telling them the way to do this, or, you just want your outcome, you've already lost that trust. All the stuff above the line, it doesn't matter. So you can be technically correct. You can be the most technically correct safety person there is. But until we can start to really lean into the other elements of this, where do we start? So I think for me, really easy equation for you to kind of pause and think on, what bits perhaps am I not doing that's not maybe getting that trust? How am I not bringing them on this, that there's clearly some sort of barrier between what I'm saying and what I'm getting back from people? So
I'll just jump in. I'm writing quickly everything that you're saying, all these little amazing bits and pieces, and I'll add links to all of these things that you've mentioned into the email that sends out afterwards.
Yeah, fab. I've tried to put like who each of them kind of came from, because as someone who is that way inclined, I tend to be like, but who was that again?
Yeah.
Yeah, like where did that come from?
Yeah.
So I totally get it. So let's talk about how we start actually doing some of this. So we've got to shift from that enforcer to a partner approach. And I think, I think around the world, we've definitely seen a lot of, you think about the shift that we've seen from a recruitment perspective to, we're no longer just seeing a direct kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like, we used to have a very static kind of, here was your health and safety administrator or coordinator, here's your health and safety advisor, senior advisor, manager, whatever. We're seeing a lot more health and safety business partner. And I think this is us trying to move from that enforcer down to more of the partner approach, that we're actually collaborating to achieve business outcomes, which then safety sits in a part of that and is, part of that, the business outcome. So if I think about, how do we, or what do we say, how do we do it, all those kind of things, the enforcer, and again, I think carrot and stick approach. So the enforcer will always say, yeah, but the law says you should, or the legislation, or the code of practice, whatever that looks like. I think we then shift this into, here's how it helps you hit, whether it's strategy, whether it's KPIs, whether it's operational efficiency, again, flicking back to that business language. How do we shift it from it being a legislative to more about being around, how do we actually get it into strategy and KPIs and things like that. So there's another really good book, if you haven't seen it. It is the Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. So Dan's book reminds us that leaders don't want to know how to solve the problem. They want to know who is going to help them solve the problem. And I think as an enforcer, we show up and we say, here's the problem. I need you to come and, I need this from the board, or I need this from the leadership team to, hey, I'm showing up. Here's the problem. I need us to, or I'm going to do X, or we as a team are going to do Y. I think automatically shifts it from, here's the problem, and here might be the solution, but that solution often is landing on those leaders, right? Versus how do we say who needs to get involved more collectively, more collaboratively to achieve that actual solution. And I think if you haven't read that book, it's just an incredible reset to, even for you as a professional, to sit and go, not how do I fix this, or how do I become more influential, even who do I need in my circle that's going to show me? Who do I need in my team to make this happen? Who do I need to collaborate with? Not how do I collaborate? How do I get IT on board? How do I go and do all of this? It's about bringing people in, and as the picture at the bottom has, is let's bring the right people in the room. So it's about who, not how, and that's the premise of as I said, Dan Sullivan's book. I think also from the enforcer perspective, that's where you've got short-term compliance versus the partner being the long-term commitment. So the enforcer relies on the rules, the penalties, that position of authority, and the partner looks more at that building the trust, building alignment, building commitment, and I think we've all seen compliance fades as soon as the auditor leaves, is very much then you're in that kind of authority, the enforcer side, you're not in the partner side, because we haven't brought people on the journey. So I think when I think about who we bring in, we need to be thinking, how do we do less of this and do this? And sometimes we might need people in the middle to give us that coaching or that guidance to support us to get to here. And don't be afraid to step into this before we totally get to there, because sometimes the leap from there to there feels gross, right? If you're going and asking people, and again, it's that little bit of pride that says, shouldn't I know this? I'm the safety person. I've worked here for X, I have X experience. That's all that self-talk, or that imposter syndrome that says, oh, heaven forbid I should ask. So I think don't be afraid to step into this space so that we can get there quicker. And again, that's bringing in the who, not how you got to this, right? So let's talk about some practical tools. If anyone wants to pause and reflect or give their own kind of versions of them, by all means. But these are just some ways that I've seen over the little while, and I've used more of these in the consulting space more recently than I did as much in sort of the corporate space. But stakeholder mapping, I wish I had done more. I think when you map your leaders by the influence and their interest, you can focus on those that have that high kind of influence first. So who are those people? And again, you can swap these words out, right? Another version of it might be, you know, who are your biggest advocates? Who are your allies in the business? Who are your champions of change? But I think if we take the time, if we're looking to influence, take the time at the start, like any change management process, to do that stakeholder management that says, stakeholder mapping that says who has interest and who has influence in whatever I'm trying to deliver. And then start to look at those kind of real high influence allies first, because that's, for me, where you get those wins over the board quickly and more efficiently. Strategic storytelling. Now, this for me is probably my biggest, I feel like strategic storytelling and data visuals, they're my two that I just love these two. But strategic storytelling, there would not be a time that you will remember a piece of data, but if you wrap that piece of data in a story, now, and I think about, again, I go back to the likes of Piper Alpha, you remember the story of that. You probably don't remember the little bits of data within that said it was, you know, X deaths or, you know, this how many people were injured, but you remember the story and the impact that sat behind that. Now, when our leaders think about data and what they need to know, 15 near misses probably doesn't mean a lot. But when we put, say, the 15 near misses into some sort of strategic storytelling process, you know, imagine if there was, say, 3 forklifts nearly collided last week. That's where 15 near misses happened. What's the outcome of those 15 colliding? So let's talk about what we do differently. So the more that we actually wrap it in a story rather than it just being static data, the better outcomes we have to influence, and we understand the next one, which is around the why. Because the more that we do storytelling, the more collaborative, the more people understand it. You can build trust, rapport, all of those great things. And perhaps it's even done before that, and it aligns really with the stakeholder mapping. These are not in order. This was just a brain dump. The 3 whys, and for the safety professionals who love their 5 whys, I'm taking 3 whys. My 4-year-old twins take about 100 whys a day. So I'm going with 3, and we're going to cut it at 3. So why does someone care? Why do they care about why I've shown up? What do they need to know? Why care about what I'm here to tell them, right? And if you can't answer that wholeheartedly, then step out of the meeting. Why are you going to present to someone if you don't understand why they should care about it? And Christina, to your point earlier, right, that's that value piece, that knowing why you care, knowing the story that comes behind it. That's that piece. If you can't communicate why someone should give a damn about what you're about to tell them, don't tell them yet, because you need to do that work for yourself or for the team so that you can communicate why they should care about it. So why now? Why do they need to know? You know that they need to care, but why do they need to know about it now? Is it something that can wait? Is it in amongst the 1,000 other fires that an executive or a leader or a team is going through? And I reflect on a recent consulting client. We know why they care, and the organisation and the frontline staff got why they cared, but the change was so rapid and they just kept firing it. And I said to them, why now? Why does every change have to come at them now? And it was, but they care. Yeah, but you've already lost them. They're not listening anymore because you've thrown too much at them. So asking that why now, we can actually stage it out. and this goes back to stakeholder mapping. It goes back to how do we put the business talk into it? Why do they need to know about it now? Is it urgent? Is it important? Is it time bound? What are the things, what are the time constrictions to that message, to that piece of data, whatever it looks like? And why me? Why is it me that has to present it? Is there someone that might be better equipped, better, have more knowledge? Is it someone that already comes from a position of trust and they might have had the conversation before? So being able to kind of tip your hat out of the system and say, hey, look, I'm probably not the best one to present this. I think it should actually go to you because you've got, all the knowledge, the background. I don't just need to be the mouthpiece for it. Let someone else speak, right? Organizational strategy. I'm a big believer in, and it goes back to the speak the language of the business, is how do we bring the strategy into it? Now, I can tell you, and I've got AI over 2 doors over with data, but I can tell you so quickly that if you dropped any organizational strategy into ChatGPT or another Grok, whatever you use, and put what you're trying to deliver from a health and safety perspective and said, help me align it to what our strategy says, you bet your bottom dollar ChatGPT can help you pump that thing out. And I think the more that we use those tools around us to align and communicate the way that the business already has agreed that they're moving, right? Again, you think about all of those different roads. If you're over here on a dirt track and everyone else is over here on a bitumen road, and you're trying to communicate in a completely foreign language to them, again, why do they need to care? Why would they care now? And why are they going to care about you talking? So let's align and communicate it to where the organization, what road are they on? What direction are they headed? What path have they already walked down? And let's leverage the work that someone else already did to come along that journey with them. Because I think when they then see us as a partner to the business, not as just a health and safety function, how much more powerful that becomes to influence the business and the leaders on health and safety. So I won't go too much on this one again, but who, not how. Find partners. As I said, go and talk to IT. Go and talk to, do you have legal counsel? Do you have, go and talk to the operations team, even if you're not in operations. Go and look for different parts of the business that can advocate. They might have just had a strategy approved. They might have just had a really big win with a budget, or they've just rolled out a really new complex, I don't know, I'd say IT system. IT is an easy one, right? They might have had a really big win rolling this out, or it might be a new HR system. What did they do? Who did they bring? What were the lessons learned? Where did they fail? What didn't work that they could come back on and go, give me those lessons? And or they're already walking that path. How do we actually come on that path with them and advocate collectively that actually this aligns both, say, a HR objective and a safety objective? Let's advocate at the same time collectively, knowing our leaders' time, say, for example, is already really scarce. So find those people, find the who, not the how, to come on the journey with you. Again, you think about, I go back to my little road. I love a good analogy. Let's put people in buses and put them all into the city rather than throwing 100 cars on the road. Let's put them all on 2 buses and charter them into the city, right? Being able to take some of those pieces off the road and come at it as one collective bus is going to do a hell of a lot more for the business than throwing 100 cars down that path, right? So I'm such an advocate for going and finding the people who are already on the journey, who already have the lessons learned, the knowledge, the rapport, the trust in the business that can come with you. You're going to have so many more wins by actually looking over the fence. And I've worked in incredible teams that aren't prepared to look over the petition at the people sitting in the little pod next to them. What do you do differently? How does the marketing team market what we do as a business? Use their skills, right? We're all working for the same business under the one banner. Why are we not utilizing the tools that are in-house? We've got marketing, we've got comms, we've got legal, we've got IT. Go and find those people to advocate alongside you. And the last one there, data visuals. Use AI. I have a mentee at the moment, and she said that using ChatGPT or similar feels like it's cheating. And I said, absolutely not. Do you use Google? Yes. Okay, well, do you use the built-in functions of, say, PowerPoint? Yes. Okay, well, it's not cheating then, is it? It's using the tools and the resources available to work more efficiently. And I think when we think about dashboard and data in particular, the sooner that we can get someone across a dashboard, again, knowing that time is scarce for a lot of people, they don't want 20-page reports, right? How do we create a dashboard, a red, amber, green, whatever it looks like, that we can even add, costs, whatever it looks, chuck it into something, use some form of AI to help you think outside the box, right? Because sometimes we get so focused and we've looked at this data 1,000 days in a row and we're still stuck. Let's pull from some source of AI to help us actually think bigger. What are we missing? How could we look at it differently? And all of a sudden you've got all of these different ideas. So don't fear it. If anyone is fearing it, please just reach out. I'd prefer to have a conversation about different ways I use it, whether it's, from extracting, whether it's for social media. I am a safety professional. I'm not a business owner. I'm not a presenter, but AI helps me. I literally put these slides, I put all the tools into AI. I said, this is everything I want to discuss. Said, can you put it into a way that makes sense? It gave me the slides. I then put the slides into Canva's AI and said, here's all the slides. It did it. It maybe took me 15 minutes to recreate slides. Are they the best? No. Do I care? Absolutely not, because it's about the message. But it stopped me getting too bogged down in all of the little fine detail. So don't fear AI. We have to use it to start being more efficient, and it might help us to actually talk organizational strategy, identify different stakeholders, think about the whys. So I think AI for me is just no brainer. But I think even if you took one of them to consider today, you're already starting to change the way that you influence the business. And I think there's such small shifts, but really can start to move the needle in that sense. So the key takeaways before we get stuck into any questions or comments, translate, learn to communicate the way that the business needs it. The more that we understand the way the business is already talking, the better outcomes we have of them understanding it, embracing it, and moving to the next point. And I think it's so, so important. Trust, as I said, that trust equation is just so important to build relationships, right? And if you feel that the relationship is starting to deteriorate, really reflecting on that trust equation and going, is there anything in this space that I could do differently? Have I shown up reliably? Do they know that I'm credible because I've delivered this program before, or I've had experience delivering it at a past organization? You may not need to communicate it directly, but think of ways that you can really show that credibility, that reliability, and think about that self-orientation and how you're showing up. And then, as I said, partnering with people, find your who, not your how. Collaborate with people in the organization to really start to shift the needle when it comes to building the process, the system, whatever it is that you're looking to achieve. Bring the people in with you. Collaboration, I would love to change the legislation from communication and consultation to add collaboration, because I think it's such an important step when it comes to health and safety. And I think it's more broader than consultation and communication, because collaboration means that we're finding the solution together, not just consulting on, hey, we're doing this, what do you think? It's, hey, let's all come to the solution together. So that is all from me. I will stop sharing.
You are incredible. I absolutely loved that so much. Thank you so much. I was typing away, getting all the links and stuff. So
I get on my soapbox on some things, but it's a topic I really love. It is something that I just so strongly believe in and value, the way that I would love influence to be the top thing that we're taught from if I learned that at the start of my degree, not now, 15 something years on, probably more like 20 years now, but the grades aren't showing today. Yeah.
You probably can't justify the degree cost then, if that was the case. But everything that you said, it just makes sense. It's logical. Like it's easy to understand. And I feel like with something that's easy to understand, it's going to become easier to implement and to start the process of implementing that change and implementing the change of the way that you word things. Even just a slight, tiny little shift of like, who can we get to help me come up with a solution with this? Not just passing the buck saying, I need you to do this. It's who can do this? Who can I get? And the other amazing thing I took away was, you're so right. Everybody that works in these corporations or even in small companies, like, or remote companies, so I'm remote from everyone else in the company, reach out to the different departments. You're 100% right. Like, how abnormal is that we don't know what marketing is doing? We don't know what the accounts are doing. We don't know what the development team are doing. Like, everybody needs to know what everyone's up to so you can get the holistic picture of your company to create influence. Like, it's such a logical thing that not nobody, but I would say not the majority do.
Well, I literally, we sat over the pod from like internal comms, and not once had anyone in our team popped their head over and said, can I just pick your brain for 5 minutes? They're literally writing comms on behalf of the business, like stuff, and they like to learn to frame the message. What does the business need to hear? When we're rolling out all staff programs, why would we not involve them? And that goes back to the stakeholder mapping, right? Is understanding who is in the business. And a classic piece for me was, and I'm not saying that everyone has to do this, but for me, the best way that I could start that was joining the social club, because it had people from all these different parts of the business come together. And I was like, so what do you do? Yeah. And I think, you know, if I had to add another C word to my collaboration, yeah, you thought I was going somewhere else, would be curious. And I wish I could literally snip the amount of episodes of the Women in Safety podcast that, you know, the women who I interview, the one thing they wish that people knew or what could they do differently was to remain curious. And I think the more that we're curious about what others do in the business only helps us understand where others are coming from. Taufik, I hope I'm not pronouncing that wrong. His question or her question is how to influence and bring the safety culture to a higher level, especially during big corporation mergers where cultures could be at different levels. So I assume you've got two organizations come into one, you've got a really strong safety culture over here and maybe not as good over here. How do you bring them up? I think there's many versions, right, or many ways that we can even start that. So for me, the first one that my brain goes to is the 3 whys. Does it need to be changed right now? Like, why are we trying to change something? So why do we need to change it? Why does it need to be changed now? You know, what is the impact if I don't do it? How do I bring them on the journey? I think the stakeholder mapping. So who's involved in this merger? Who have I already got that's a strong influence over here and a strong influence over there? How do we bring that? Who are the players involved that were a part of the merger, and why did the merger happen? Do you understand as the safety professional why the impact of the merger was so important? Why did we want to take these two companies to come into this one? What was the thought behind it? Because the more that we understand that, and again, talking to the business sense, is there was clearly a very good business sense for them to come together. And what you have to do is find the ways to align, you know, those really big kind of corporate high-level business decisions, the strategic side, to come across into how do we build it from a safety. But I think for me, the first thing has to be, why does it matter to bring them to a higher level right now? Is it that they are completely unsafe? Different story, right? But what's the impact if they operate at a bit different levels right now? So yeah, I think understanding the why.
That's a beautiful message, Nicole. Thank you so much. I don't know that there's any other questions, but honestly, this has been one of my favorite webinars. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I hope that we can catch up again and have another one. Like I said earlier, I've got all the links to everything that you've mentioned throughout, and we've recorded the session. I will put it all together and send it out to everybody that's registered. Obviously, if you couldn't make it or you had to duck out early, we can send that through to you as well. Again, thank you so much, Alanna.
You're very welcome
today.
Thanks to everyone that spent their valuable time. I think it's always so incredible that, you know, anytime I get to spend with other professionals that are prepared to learn. I think, as I said, that curiosity, I think you were curious enough to know and curious to learn. I think the more that you just stay curious to learn and to learn from others is so important. But Naomi, I'm not a superhero. I am human. I have fails. I have bad days. I have good days. I think the more that we just stay excited to learn and to do things is just so valuable. But thank you.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Hope to see you on our upcoming webinars, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, Christina.
Bye.